This is an incredible day in which we're living. The church is experiencing phenomenal growth. I know that in some places in the West you don't see that, but around the world, God is doing some remarkable things. I've been in places like Iran where the church is growing so rapidly and God is doing a great work. Other places in China, God is just doing this extraordinary work in the church, but it's all connected to prayer. In Matthew chapter 24, Jesus said that the gospel of the kingdom would go into all the world and then the end would come. We could be living in such a day in which the gospel is going into all the world. I remember I was in a conference and I was speaking, and there was another pastor who was speaking who was a good friend of mine, and this pastor talked about church growth, and he talked about the methods and the strategies and all of those things that they had used for their church to grow. But there was one thing he didn't tell them, and I talked to him about that. I said, you know, I know, because I'd preached in his church. He had invited me to be there, and I'd preached in his church, and there was one thing that he didn't tell everybody. Every morning when he stood on Sunday to preach, there were a group of people in his office on their faces before God, crying out to God, asking God to send a mighty revival. Listen, prayer always prepares the hearts of people. That's why prayer must be a priority in the life of God's people, why it must come first. We must first seek the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and then all these other things will be added unto us. It's great to have strategy. It's great to make plans. We must do those things. But first of all, it must begin in prayer. Jesus, when He established the church, He told them to wait for the promise of the Father in Jerusalem. And that they would wait for God to move and work. And we find in Acts chapter 1, the church did that. The church was birthed in a prayer meeting. Well, in these days in which God is doing extraordinary things, if we will pray, God will do extraordinary things in our lives, in our churches, in our communities. But prayer must be a priority.